I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championships.
The rivalries, it's up there on top of the list, man. And if we allow them to devalue it, we lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. All right, let's get into the big news that dropped on Tuesday for Ohio State fans. Look, as long as I can remember, Ohio State fans have been getting more and more irritated about the environment at the horseshoe, the lack of the big game atmosphere, the lack of noise, the lousy scoreboard, the lousy restrooms, the lines to the restrooms, then the porta potties in the concourse, then the dumpsters in the concourse, the audio, the TVs. You can just go down the line and look at all the other stadiums that are like Ohio Stadium and programs that are like Ohio State that have managed to keep their stadiums updated throughout the course of time in a way that it makes them feel very modern inside without losing that historical feel. And Ohio State has not done that. They have been poor stewards of the most iconic building in the state of Ohio. They really have. They've not kept up on it. And it has irritated me a lot. And I have been, one of the things about social media that you like is it reaffirms things that you thought like maybe you were kind of on your own. Like I used to be so bothered by this, and social media comes around and you get to see so many people's opinions. And turns out so many Buckeyes feel the same way, just like embarrassed at the way they have let this building that means so much to so many of us. Like when I think of a college football program, the first thing that comes to my mind is the uniform and the stadium. Those two things. I'm a lover of stadiums. Maybe it means more to me than other people. I also love architecture, and Ohio Stadium is just something so unique and so special to me, and probably most to you. And it's just pissed me off when you're talking about every year you see the figure roll out, the wealthiest athletic department in the country. Ohio State has been number one or number two as long as I've seen those figures come out. So you need to make upgrades to the stadium. And as we've gone through time, it feels like they've not been done. And now what you've got is what could have been an incremental project is now a big project. Enter Ross Bjork. So in comes Ross Bjork, the new AD. And there are a couple things that are immediately true about Ross Bjork that pop out about him. One, the guy's a great salesman. And a great salesman very easily and quickly identifies what his customers want, and he finds a way to sell them on what they want while simultaneously getting what he wants. So he's looking at this big, historic, gorgeous stadium, and he's seeing all the things that need repaired. He's seeing all the things that need improved. And then he's seeing all the areas of untapped revenue. He knows Ohio State fans desperately want the stadium to be refreshed, both in atmosphere, aesthetically, and functionally. And he made this maybe his biggest platform, and he made it very public. He focused on the atmosphere, also talked about adding additional revenue streams, and that's important. And it's important to note that before we even get into what's going on right now, you're going to hear many people say, revenue sharing is here now. They've got to find ways to make more money. Listen, I want the richest athletic department in the country to stay that way. I want them to make money. The more money the athletic department makes, the better the facilities, the better the stadium, the better everything. But it's got to be done right. You've got the richest athletic department in the country, and you've had that for a long time, and you've let the stadium fall into a state that other programs have managed to not let their stadium fall into. So just bringing in the money isn't enough. It's got to be spent right. But to the crowd that says revenue sharing is here, they need to make more money, I need everybody to understand something. 2024, Ohio State got a $50 million raise every year. That's coming in. In 2025, they take on $22 million in new expenses for revenue sharing, which means that $50 million raise is just a $28 million raise. So even with revenue sharing, they have a newfound $28 million as of last year. They're not in the hole. We don't need to cry them a river here. They just got a big raise. So, in addition, that TV contract that gave them that $50 million raise, we are also the ones who are being saddled with the brunt of it, and it is negatively affecting our atmosphere. We deserve some benefits out of this, no doubt. Now, Ross Bjork is going to try to optimize the revenue from the stadium, and obviously, we've got no problem with that. That's good. We want to optimize the amount of revenue streams we can get. But whenever you're considering a project at a stadium like Ohio Stadium, there should be a couple things in my mind that should be at the top of your list that you should try to avoid if at all possible. And I say try to avoid because every single time you change something in a historic stadium to add revenue, there's going to be some negative consequence. And you have to accept that. But some negative consequences are ones that you don't want to compromise too much on. The negative consequences could be in several different areas. It could be just in one area. It could be in several different areas. Let's say you're building boxes, and a lot of times they got to take away from the overall seating capacity. So that's one negative consequence. We all like to see that number, that max capacity number, that largest crowd number. You put in a bunch of boxes, that number goes down. Fans don't like that. That would be a negative consequence. That's probably a minimal negative consequence. We've seen a lot of people just forget it. Who cares? You need that money. You could see ones that's you put in boxes or something and it obscures the view or changes the view, or it's not aesthetically pleasing. It's a bit of an eyesore. It doesn't really fit in with the stadium. We see that. That would be an example of a negative consequence. There's always going to be push and pull and give and take when you make these kinds of decisions. But when you look at the potential negative consequences, when you are gauging these kind of projects and deciding which ones you should move forward with, if you're talking about a place like Ohio Stadium, there are two areas that pop out right away that you really want to try to avoid affecting at Ohio Stadium. Number one on that list is stadium environment. You already have an issue with the stadium game day environment. It's something everybody's been begging to try to improve. So many of us have tried to encourage fellow fans while we're at games, etc., to get more engaged in a game that doesn't really have the juice naturally built in. And it's one of those things, like, it's kind of on us, the fans, right? But there are things you can do to assist. But you definitely don't want to do anything that's going to negatively affect something that we already struggle with, right? So that's the number one thing you want to avoid. You want to avoid anything that is going to negatively affect the environment. And number two, we have a historic, beautiful stadium. You don't want to do anything that's going to stick out like a sore thumb, right? You don't want to do anything that's going to take away from the beautiful aesthetics of a historic stadium. There are ways to do things tastefully that blends in. Now, if I was on the board and we're looking at any of these projects and any of these things that they're kicking around potentially doing, that's kind of my guideline. That's what I'm going off of. All right, let's find ways to make money every way we can, and let's try our damnedest not to mess with those two things in a negative way. And I think most logical Ohio State fans would say, yeah, that's probably a good logical way of going into this kind of thing. But we understand that there is going to be push and pull. You do need to find ways to create extra revenue. That's just the way this goes. But you want to minimize the damage. So Ross Bjork comes in, and he is running on his plan to upgrade the stadium and make the stadium better, make the environment better, and maximize revenue and all of these things. And so far, we've had 3 initiatives from Ross Bjork. We just got our third one, and I'm going to go through each of them. But before I do, I want to say that they've done a really poor job in the way they've released this information, and it's causing them unnecessary grief, in my opinion. Let me explain what I mean. So the first initiative was the 1922 Club. In the 1922 Club, what is it? It is opening in 2026, and according to the university, it's a lounge that will provide a game day experience of a spacious lounge atmosphere for only the most exclusive. That's the tagline. Only the most exclusive, right there in sentence number 2. It's an all-inclusive space, limited memberships, provides upscale food and beverage on game days. Get out of the heat, get out of the cold. Either way, it's got air conditioning and heat in there. On game days, The other 359 days of the year, it's going to be a restaurant, a members only restaurant. And it's $4,500 per person per year. And that gets you into the lounge on game day to have all the food and beer and wine you want. Opens 3 hours before kick, closes 1 hour after kick. That's a lot of food and drink you can consume on that day. Now, that $4,500 just for the food and the booze doesn't count your game day ticket. Important to note, because they fail to mention anywhere in there, that there is no view of the field. There's no way you're going to be able to see the game other than the TV. So you're sitting in this lounge, grabbing a bite to eat in the bowels of the stadium in this nice looking lounge, but you might as well not even be at the stadium because you can't see the field. Now, there's also a social membership club to this thing for $1,000 a year, and that gets you the opportunity to make reservations at the restaurant on non-game days. So you can go spend your money there on non-game days. And when the news comes out about this 1922 program, it doesn't take away any seats. It raises money. It does not take away from the aesthetics. It's in the bowels of the stadium. It doesn't negatively affect the environment. Like, it checks all my boxes, right? All this does is give people who want to spend more money the opportunity to do so. That's a huge win, whether you're interested in it or not. If you're interested in it, you go spend your money and you enjoy the space. If you're not, you don't lose anything in your stadium experience. It's not an eyesore. It doesn't take away seating, and it brings the athletic department more money. So that's great. Now, it doesn't help when it comes out and says it caters to the exclusive, and that is the first thing released, right? Because if you're running on a platform, essentially, and I say running on it, every AD wants to be loved. Ross Bjork really wants to be loved. And his thing is the stadium, right? He's made it his thing. And the first thing that comes out in the second sentence says caters to the most exclusive. It put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. I'm not saying it should. Again, you want to cater to those folks, but there's ways you can kind of offset that sour taste you put in people's mouths, and they didn't do it. Now, let's go to this. Upgrade number 2. They did a horrible job of marketing this. Could have done much, much better to get a better fan reception. They didn't get the biggest bang for their buck here. They never even announced they were going to do it. They just did it, and then we saw it debut. They did it, they teased it in a Twitter post, and then we saw it at Tennessee on a freezing cold night, and that is the red LED lighting around the stadium. After 3 horrific, tumultuous weeks, the 3 weirdest weeks of my Ohio State fandom, the team took the field against Tennessee that night to host the first ever playoff game in the shoe. They exploded. The crowd exploded. It was the craziest, most raucous, awesome environment I've ever been in at the shoe. And those new red LED lights absolutely added to the environment. I loved it. I thought it was just, visually, it just made things feel different. Just felt cooler. It was awesome. I was so pumped for it. I talked about it for a week straight on the show afterwards. But they didn't get the biggest bang for their buck, because if I asked you, what projects has Ross Bjork done so far to the stadium, everybody would say the 1922 club and what was just announced the other day. Nobody remembers this because they didn't promote it. They didn't pump it. They just kind of released it. And it was not a great thing to do, because now we roll into the new announcement we just got, and that's project number 3. And that is the Ohio State Athletic Department has debuted a new section, will debut a new section of premium seating at Ohio Stadium for the 2026 football season. The South End Zone Premium Seating. This exciting new seating opportunity will feature 9 elevated field level suites, 12-person capacity, located in front of the South Stands, and 400 premium chairback seats on top of the suites. These chairback seats will be the widest seats in the stadium. All right, so let's discuss exactly what this is. What are we adding here? Let's look at the rendering. Now, here's the rendering. Let's look at the current South Stands. Now, when I first read this and I first looked at the rendering, I thought they were taking these boxes and just putting them in front of the south stands, and that it was going to be moved closer to the field, which I actually liked the idea of that. One of the things I wish was different about Ohio Stadium is that it was never built with a track around it initially, because you've got this space that shouldn't be there. You know, if you could alter something, it would be everything would be a little more close to the field. And I did kind of like the thought of, all right, we're going to bring that closer to the field. That might feel a little more warm and comfortable. I kind of liked it. I also cannot stand the ring of concrete outside the turf. It drives me nuts. I wish they would turf the entire concrete, make the whole thing, the whole inner ring turfed would be much better. That's a side note. But my initial thought was wrong. They're not just adding this in front. Again, let's look at the south stands, and you see where the band is over here on the left. Now, from that very front row where the band sits, all the way to that top row where the band is on the left there, all the way to the right, that entire section is being removed, and that is being replaced with those 9 boxes that seat 12 people. And on top of that, the 400 seats that cost $1,000 per season. I'm sorry, $1,000 per game, $6,000 a season. Now, let's talk about the revenue. Will they sell those boxes and will they sell those seats? Absolutely. We know that's going to happen. We all agree those are crappy seats. I'm not sure my wife would argue. She doesn't so much care about the view, which I think we all agree as football fans, that's a terrible view. But she's very irritated that there are only 18 inches between the numbers on the bleachers and that my shoulders are considerably wider than 18 inches. Now, they boast these as the widest ones in the stadium. If she heard this, she would probably say, we're sitting there next time. And I don't care that it's $1,000 because we usually pay $1,000 anyway. But I'm not paying $1,000 to sit in the end zone. When I pay that kind of money, I'm certainly not sitting in the end zone. I'm not sitting down that low. But we know people will buy them. There will be a waiting list. We know they will buy the boxes up. We know that will happen. Now, when we look at our stated mission, making revenue that didn't exist, check, you got it. Okay. More money for the athletic department. What are the negatives of this plan? Let's start with aesthetically. There's going to be different opinions here. And I know we're not really going to know how we feel about this till we see it done. Does it fit with the 100-year-old stadium? No, it probably sticks out like a sore thumb. However, had you been updating this stadium throughout the years, probably wouldn't stick out so much. My personal opinion, I think this will probably end up looking pretty slick. I wish it was closer to the field. That's just what I think I'm going to feel. But again, you got to see something like this before you can really make a judgment on how you think it looks, I think. But I totally understand the people who are very irritated, think this is a horrible look. And I just personally, I'm going to reserve my judgment on the look until I see it completed. And we also got to factor in, while it may look like it sticks out like a sore thumb as just the first of these type of projects, we can expect a lot more. It's not going to be the only one, which means it's probably not going to stick out like a sore thumb, unfortunately. Now, safe to say, going to be mixed opinions on how it looks aesthetically. How about the most important thing? How does it affect the environment? What are you giving up? Well, the band and that entire section of students closest to the field being removed there and replaced with luxury boxes and 400 very expensive seats, which we know generally go to folks who aren't very loud and noisy. Instead, the loud and noisy folks are being moved back behind them. Now, the band is being moved to the opposite side of the stadium. They're going to the north stands. And they released a Twitter video saying, we're going back home to the north side of the stadium. Like they're excited for it. Now, that's propaganda. The reason that they moved them to the south stands was because everybody agreed it would be much better to have them with the students. And that's for sure. You want the band with the students. But if we're being totally honest, in a modern stadium, the band doesn't get the kids hyped anymore. It's the music on the PA. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. But I'm the old guy who likes to hear the band more than the PA. I don't want to hear the PA at all playing music. But I understand it doesn't matter what I want. I'm an old fuddy-duddy. It's about what's going to help the atmosphere and the environment. And that is definitely, for most people in that stadium, The music. All right, get the young people hyped with the music. Unfortunately, the band doesn't do as good of a job as that in 2025. It just doesn't. Does for me, not for most. Does it negatively affect the atmosphere by removing the students closest to the field, the loudest people in the stadium, moving them further away? Absolutely, it does. Nobody can argue against that. The only argument you can have is how much does it affect negatively? Truth is, none of us are going to know until we're inside the stadium. How much does it negatively affect it? We're going to find out. We're going to find out because they're going through with this. Now, I've talked to a source that told me that this project, when this released, it was, you guys know I could skew negative, right? When this was announced, it was a crap storm. I mean, an enormous crap storm of negativity. And it is so self-inflicted by Ohio State. Like, people were furious about this. And there were people high up in the administration who told Ross Bjork and the powers that be that made this decision that this was going to be a very unpopular move. They went ahead with it anyway. And of course they did, because we consume this product no matter what they do. Our consuming habits of the Ohio State football brand have never changed. And until they do, they're going to do whatever they want. And the backlash just dies down. It doesn't matter. I do think Ross Bjork very much cares about how he's publicly perceived by Ohio State fans. Really, a lot. And I think they made a big error here. And I think it was so easily correctable. In the grand scheme of things, when we look at this particular project, how outraged am I by it? There's a whole lot of other things they could do that would piss me off a lot more than this. I don't love it because it's going to negatively affect the atmosphere. I'm not enraged over it. If they put a patch on the most beautiful uniform in sport, I'll be apoplectic. Like, there are some, we all got our own pet peeves. To me, you mess with that uniform and I'm going to be just furious. But how could Ross Bjork have done this where it would not have gotten this huge negative backlash? Well, he came in and said he was going to improve the game day atmosphere. He's launched 2 very public projects. Both of them have been for the exclusive customer. And the 90% of Ohio State fans who don't fall into that category read that and it pisses them off. And they say, what about us, man? And it's such an easy thing to fix. All Ross Bjork and the people in charge needed to do was come out right off the rip before they announced the 1922 club and say, we have begun a plan to redo the scoreboard in a tasteful way that fits in with Ohio Stadium. We're looking into the most modern, safest, and best looking turf in the country to replace the current playing surface. And we have an 8-year plan to rehabilitate every restroom in the stadium. All right, so what did you commit to there? You said you're looking into the turf. Well, you're going to need to replace the turf in 3 years anyway. That'll be its life. So you just added something onto that list that people really want, and you're going to do it anyway. You said you are going to plan to redo the scoreboard in a tasteful way that fits in with Ohio Stadium. That takes several years of planning, and certainly that's on the plans anyway. They're going to redo the scoreboard. That's absolutely going to happen. Make it public. The only thing you committed to in real tangible dollars immediately was rehabilitating the restrooms over a period of 8 years. And I'm sure it's in the budget over 8 years to redo the restrooms in the stadium. And if they had come out and just said that right there, with the only immediate financial commitment being we're going to start on the restrooms, people hear that. And then when they hear the stuff for exclusive customers, now it's just more added onto all this new stuff we're getting. And instead of doing that, they rolled out 2 exclusive rich people plans. And everybody's like, screw this, man. You said you were going to come in and make this better, and all you care about is catering to the rich folks. Like, it was just so poorly played from a messaging standpoint. So I am patiently waiting to hear the announcement of something that matters in a positive way to the upkeep of the stadium and the environment of the stadium. Because now what you've done is you've gone and added 2 money-making programs. Okay, Ross, now show us how it's going to be spent with something cool that everybody's going to like. And if it's not cool, make it infrastructure to upkeep of the stadium. Because everybody remembers that shot in that game that Fox was broadcasting up in the booth, where the camera pans up to the booth, and behind Joel Klatt and Gus Johnson, there are ceiling tiles with exposed electrical wiring and ductwork hanging down under empty and rotted ceiling tiles. It was humiliating. So that's that about that. The boxes look terrible. There's a lot of upkeep that needs made. And when we look at the rest of the stadiums around the country that are on Ohio State's level, there's a massive project going on at Penn State right now. They literally dropped an entire wall of the stadium, like a whole side of it, erected a temporary stand while they redo the whole thing, and they're going to replace all the outside erector set look with, like brick. They're doing an awesome job, a big, huge thing. Like, I just refuse to believe that all these other schools can make this happen and Ohio State is like poor. Like, shut up, man. What are we talking about here? It drives me nuts. Anyway. All right. I think I've talked long enough about the stadium.